We've got big problems, folks. Things are only getting worse in Russia, and this is bad news for things like gas prices, which will make inflation across the board even worse, as basically everything is transported with fuel. And this is only going to make things more difficult for seniors. Now, President Biden is about to speak live discussing what exactly is happening with Russia, potential sanctions that could impose, economic sanctions, basically trying to force Russia to pull back. This could potentially be a really informative speech. Now, as always, folks, before we jump into it, do me a quick favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and share this channel with anyone who you think might find this helpful. This is a community for seniors, and my job here is to bring you the news that affects seniors the most. So thank you so much for watching, folks, and with that said, let's jump right into it. Let's take a look and see what the talking heads are saying regarding the crisis in Ukraine. Things are looking like they're escalating, and this is only going to make things more difficult when it comes to inflation. You know, Russia is one of the largest suppliers of gas, and when gas gets more expensive, a lot of times basically everything gets more expensive across the board, as this makes supply chains and deliveries more expensive across the board. At the same time, Democrats and President Biden, they're trying to fix all these issues before the midterm elections in November, because as of now, they're expected to be wiped out, and Republicans are expected to take control of both the House and the Senate, which would leave President Biden as a sitting duck. So we're waiting for President Biden to go live. In the meantime, let's take a look and see what the talking heads are saying and what we expect President Biden to say.
Audience you tend to get at any time. Here's his approval rating at the moment: 41 approve, 55% disapprove. If that number holds up, that's the average of the recent poll. If that number holds up, the Democrats will likely lose both the House and the Senate. So that's part of the big president's challenge. And there's always a competition. What can I get in the president's speech? Every agency in government, everybody outside. There's a new study, Dan Bowles writes about it in the Washington Post today, from the Progressive Policy Institute. Two more centrist Democrats. They're progressives, but they tend to be more from the middle of the party. Bill Galston and Elaine Kamarck writing that they believe the party have been led astray by three persistent myths: that people of color think and act the same way, that economics always trumps culture, and that a progressive majority is emerging. The point being, is Biden's speech going to be all about the economy, or is he going to get into these other cultural issues that are driving Republican politics right now?
Yeah, we've been hearing this ramped up drumbeat in the last couple of weeks. Centrist Democrats saying that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has gone too far, that there's a backlash, that we're seeing it play out in school politics. And I think that is going to be shaping the conversations to some extent inside the White House about what to emphasize in this speech. Russia as a new element into what needs to get tackled in this address, Biden's ability to position himself as a world leader, not just a domestic leader. Then I think COVID is still the big cloud that's hanging over everything, both on the health front and the economic front. And Biden has to find a way to set expectations without repeating all the pitfalls of Jimmy Carter and malaise. And, it's going to be a very complicated speech. Some of our reporting, my colleagues, Hans Nichols and Jonathan Swan over the weekend, reporting on the discussions inside both the White House and Biden's outside circle of advisors about whether he needs a foil, a Republican foil, and who that foil could be. Can't be Trump, can't only be Trump. We know that from the Virginia race. Can it be Ron DeSantis, or would that backfire? Does anyone outside of Washington or Bakersfield know Kevin McCarthy? Could it be Mitch McConnell? Would Biden do that? Or can it be a composite foil? Can there be a kind of Trump MAGA January 6th foil for Biden to run against? Will we see any of that messaging in the State of the Union?
Well, fascinating week ahead. Again, the president about 10 minutes away from new sanctions against Russia. We will start there and then follow it through the week ahead.
All right, folks. So it looks like Biden is set to announce some sanctions they're going to put on Russia, basically trying to threaten Russia to not fully invade. Again, we don't really talk about things that are too sensitive on this channel like this, but this could have a massive effect on inflation, which could hurt seniors across the board. Remember, if gas gets more expensive, which Russia is one of the largest suppliers in the world of gas, if gas gets more expensive, that makes delivering things more expensive as well, right? Companies like FedEx, basically every company's bottom line is going to get more expensive if gas gets more expensive, and those costs eventually get passed on to the customer, which could lead inflation to keep getting worse. So this is going to have a massive impact on seniors. We're waiting for President Biden to go live and it's going to be pretty eye-opening. Like, how many sanctions is Biden going to impose? Will he impose any at all, or is this just kind of a rumor? And if he does impose some, will he kind of save some in his back pocket? Like, how aggressive essentially is President Biden going to be, right? And again, all of this is happening as Democrats are trying to increase their numbers in the polls to try and not get wiped out in these midterm elections, on top of things like approving a budget, not to mention the Build Back Better Act, and appoint a new Supreme Court justice. So, with President Biden going live, let's take a quick look, see what President Biden had to say, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Yesterday, Vladimir Putin recognized 2 regions of Ukraine as independent states. And he bizarrely asserted that these regions are no longer part of Ukraine and their sovereign territory. To put it simply, Russia just announced that it is carving out a big chunk of Ukraine. Last night, Putin authorized Russian forces to deploy into these regions. Today, he asserted that these regions are actually extend deeper than the 2 areas he recognized, claiming large areas currently under the jurisdiction of the Ukrainian government. He's setting up a rationale to take more territory by force, in my view. And if we listened to his speech last night, and many of you did, I know, he's setting up a rationale to go much further. This is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, as he indicated and asked permission to be able to do from his Duma. So let's begin to, I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions. Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law and demands a firm response from the international community. Over the last few months, we've coordinated closely with our NATO allies and partners in Europe and around the world to prepare that response. We've said all along, and I've told Putin to his face more than a month ago, that we would act together. And the moment Russia moved against Ukraine, Russia has now undeniably moved against Ukraine by declaring these independent states. So today, I'm announcing the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia in response to their actions yesterday. These have been closely coordinated with our allies and partners and will continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates. We're implementing full blocking sanctions on 2 large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russia's sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either. Starting tomorrow and continuing in the days ahead, we'll also impose sanctions on Russia's elites and their family members. They share in the corrupt gains of the Kremlin policies and should share in the pain as well. And because of Russia's actions, we've worked with Germany to ensure Nord Stream 2 will not, as I promised, will not move forward. As Russia contemplates its next move, we have our next move prepared as well. Russia will pay an even steeper price if it continues its aggression, including additional sanctions. The United States will continue to provide defensive assistance to Ukraine in the meantime, and will continue to reinforce and reassure our NATO allies. Today, in response to Russia's admission that it will not withdraw its forces from Belarus, I have authorized additional movements of U.S. forces and equipment already stationed in Europe to strengthen our Baltic allies, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Let me be clear, these are totally defensive moves on our part. We have no intention of fighting Russia. We want to send an unmistakable message, though, that the United States, together with our allies, will defend every inch of NATO territory and abide by the commitments we made to NATO. We still believe that Russia is poised to go much further in launching a massive military attack against Ukraine. Hope I'm wrong about that. Hope we're wrong about that. But Russia has only escalated its threat against the rest of Ukrainian territory, including major cities and including the capital city of Kyiv. There are still well over 150,000 Russian troops surrounding Ukraine. And as I said, Russian forces remain positioned in Belarus to attack Ukraine from the north. Over the last few days, we've seen much of the playbook that Secretary Blinken laid out last week in the United Nations Security Council come to pass. A major increase in military provocations and false flag events along the line of contact in the Donbass. Dramatically staged, conveniently on-camera meeting of Putin's Security Council to grandstand for the Russian public. And now, political provocation of recognizing sovereign Ukrainian territory as so-called independent republics in clear violation, again, of international law. President Putin has sought authorization from the Russian parliament to use military force outside of Russian territory. And this set the stage for further pretexts of further provocations by Russia to try to justify further military action. None of us should be fooled. None of us will be fooled. There is no justification. Further Russian assault in Ukraine remains a severe threat in the days ahead. And if Russia proceeds, it is Russia and Russia alone that bears the responsibility. As we respond, my administration is using every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers from rising prices at the pump. As I said last week, defending freedom will have cost for us as well and here at home. We need to be honest about that. But as we do this, I'm going to take robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at the Russian economy, not ours. We're closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We're executing a plan in coordination with major oil-producing consumers and producers toward a collective investment to secure stability in global energy supplies. This will blunt gas prices. I want to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. In the last few days, I've been in constant contact with European leaders, including with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Vice President Harris met in person with the leaders in Germany over the weekend at the Munich conference, including President Zelensky. At every step, we have shown the United States and our allies and partners are working in unison, which he hasn't been counting on, Mr. Putin. We're united in our support of Ukraine. We are united in our opposition to Russian aggression. And we're united in our resolve to defend our NATO alliance. And we're united in our understanding of the urgency and seriousness of the threat Russia is making to global peace and stability. Yesterday, the world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history, going back more than a century, as he waxed eloquently, noting that, well, I'm not going to go into it, but nothing in Putin's lengthy remarks indicate any interest in pursuing real dialogue on European security in the year 2022. He directly attacked Ukraine's right to exist. He indirectly threatened territory formerly held by Russia, including nations that today are thriving democracies and members of NATO. And there's no question that Russia is the aggressor. So we're clear-eyed about the challenges we're facing. Nonetheless, there is still time to avert the worst-case scenario that will bring untold suffering to millions of people if they move as suggested. The United States and our allies and partners remain open to diplomacy if it is serious. When all is said and done, we're going to judge Russia by its actions, not its words. And whatever Russia does next, we're ready to respond with unity, clarity, and conviction. We'll probably have more to say about this as it moves on. I'm hoping diplomacy is still available. Thank you all very much.